So I'm starting off with a Z sphere, and then I'm hitting the T key, and then I'm rotating so that I can make sure my symmetry is working correctly. There it is. And I'm just going to start creating some basic pieces on top of him. So I'm going to my move tool, I'm going to my Z sphere, and I'm just kind of shaping it out. Your whole process for this should happen relatively quick. And what I mean by that is just it shouldn't take you 2 classes to get a basic structure. It should be like 2 hours at the very most just to get a basic structure of it so you can move on to the modeling part. And the goal is that it is a basic structure. You'll tweak it and modify it afterwards, but for now it's just a basic layout of where your character is at. Knees are buckled. There we go. Oops. You can see how I'm just kind of moving these, just trying to get the basic gesture of how my character is laid out. That's there. And I'm not spending too much time in one area either. I'm just kind of like, you know, laying things out, and then I can come back in and add, whoops, more divisions. Wrong button. There we go.
What button is that? More divisions.
To what?
Make more divisions.
I think it just clicked. Yeah, it just clicked.
Click.
Yeah, I'm just clicking in the middle of it. Okay. Now, like I said before, you don't want to bunch your stuff up too close because then it's hard to get into those creased areas. You want to make sure it's spread out enough that you can do it. So if I did this kind of like monkey type pose, like, you know, like that, that should be pretty good. Always zoom out, look at the whole character. What do the legs look like compared to the arms? Upper body, lower body. What does the width look like? You may need to adjust some of these parameters as you're going so you don't get too far ahead. Like if I shrink these in like that, then obviously the legs and the arms aren't matching, so I need to shrink the legs up to get those to match. But because we're not doing a specific human, you can really kind of play with these things to get them to look the way you want. Pull these back a little bit. It's a Kardashian. Alright, over there. Come on. That's the head. I'll go to the scale tool and just scale up the head area. And remember, the head's just going to be a circle, so you're not doing anything crazy here. And then we can use the A key as our preview, so we can see what the character looks like. Looks like he has hunched shoulders, a little bit too much. Whoops, too much. Pull that down, pull that up. There we go. Maybe a little bit taller head. So I'm just using A to toggle back and forth. So that should be sufficient to kind of start off the process for this. Okay, I can also go into the hand and pull out each finger if I wanted to. I'm going to show how I can do that separately afterwards and then attach it, so I'm not too worried about it. Sir.
So when you go back to the, so that pill on top, is that supposed to be the head?
Yes, that will be the head.
That will be the head.
Yeah. So I'll add more geometry to that shape, but it's just kind of like the gesture of it, of where it's going to be at. Just like the back here doesn't really have a lot of back, I'm going to add shape to that to get more of a back, more of a rib cage and all that. Alright, so that's cool. So I'm going to go down to my adaptive skin. I'm going to say make it. There we go. And so now if I come up here, I should have a skin. Okay, and this is my locked in one where I can't hit the A key to go back and forth. So there he is. Alright, so I'm going to add some shape to this. Now before I do any of that, I'm using a tablet. So I do all my Z-spheres with a mouse. That's just how I work. You should at least attempt playing with the tablet because it helps. It helps incredibly a whole lot. And my setup for this, we count tablet properties. There we go. Is for the mapping, I do it towards one monitor. I set it to be like a pen, and then I force the proportions of the monitor. Okay, if you don't, if you're drawing a circle on your tablet, it'll actually come out like an oval, so you don't want that to happen. So you force proportions, meaning that this shape that we have here is more in line of what our monitor is, so it should give us more accurate representations of what we're drawing. It does take some time to get used to. especially for ZBrush because it does have some like weird little hiccups that it does inside there, like that one. Yeah. Like when you hold Alt, it's like a button. I could probably turn it off. I just am too lazy to even look up how to do that. All right, so what I'm going to do is start sculpting on him. So I'm going to use the Move tool, and I just want to start moving some of these pieces around. So like the shoulders here, I want to move these up. Okay, so you can see how it's moving it a little bit. I'm going to turn on my symmetry by hitting X or going up to Transform. There it is. Activating symmetry, and then you can pick the direction. Usually it's whatever you symmetrically drew it in the first place should already be set up correctly. And I'm going to take my Z intensity up. There we go. All right. So now I'm just going through and just kind of pulling out these pieces. Let me shrink my brush down. A little bit bigger. Now one thing that can happen is if I drew this maybe a little bit too big, my initial brush size may have been enormous. It may have been like 1,000, right? So right now my brush is at 237, which is a huge size. I'm going to scale this down by just going to my deformation. And then under size, I'm just going to shrink it. And that'll make sure my brushes are at a more acceptable size. Like 200 is a ridiculous size. There we go. So this is a little bit easier to work with as I'm tweaking this. There we go. So something like that. Oh my gosh, the back is collapsed. All right, so what I need to do is add some more volume here. If I go and pull this, what's going to happen is those vertices are so close together, it's going to pull the front and the back together. So under my brushes, there's one called Inflate. I think it's N, yes, there we go. Or it's called Inflat. And if I go to Inflat, I can add some volume to that. And it'll add more volume to the back and the front. Then I can hold down Shift to get into my smooth. And then just kind of smooth out that shape. Then if I switch back to my Move tool, then I can tweak how the shape is looking. Now one thing that's happening here too is I'm grabbing the back, but it's also grabbing the front. So under every brush, there's a depth. And right now my depth is set pretty low, and that's probably why his back got so screwed up in the first place. I'm just going to reset this to 0, but it's how deep that brush is going. Not only you see like the left and right, that's how deep it's going into the surface. So as I started sculpting the back, it was pulling towards the front because it's kind of like a sphere instead of just this solid brush. So now you can see that I'm not affecting the other side. Let's smooth that out a little bit. Oops. It's a little bit bigger. There we go. Smooth out the butt. Start pulling that out.
Does it mess up anything if you don't like change the size so where your brushes are like ridiculous?
No, it's not going to mess anything up. It's just you have to get used to working like that. I've had it before where my 1,000 was like this big,
yeah,
and I can't do anything. I need it bigger because 1,000 is where it caps off. All right. So I just kind of created some basic shape there. I'm going to smooth out this area. I could also use the clay buildup. So this is another popular brush. If you watch any videos online, there's a lot of people who like to just jump right from the basic to using the clay buildup. And I think too, yeah, this one is a little bit out. So I need to make it. If you have a tiny area, this is usually where you're going to run into issues. Come on. Of it kind of pinching or losing volume on one side. So I'm going to use Inflate on here just to kind of puff those up a little bit. Give me a little bit more volume in those areas so I can use something like the other brush, like the clay buildup. So I'm just inflating and then kind of smoothing it out a little bit. And I can also use the Move tool to kind of help shape some of this too. Okay, so there's the knees right there. Come on. See, every once in a while there's a little bit of a hiccup where it just like lags. There we go. A little bit more intensity. Alright, I'm going to go a little bit more detailed on this just so I can tweak this a bit further. So I just Control-D just to add more divisions to this. There we go. See, that's where I'm losing it right there. You see how I lost all the volume inside the leg? Because there's just not enough there. So I'm just going to inflate. Yeah, I don't know. They couldn't fit the whole word. Whoa. And take this intensity up. Now as I hold down Shift and go to the smooth brush, it has its own intensity. So you may have one intensity you're working with, and you switch to the smooth brush, well, that's a different intensity. So you gotta tweak both. Come on. There we go. Alright, so I'm just kind of softening some of this transition area. I'm going to make this bigger. I think my size is a little bit too small now. There we go. It still seems like it's pushing it way too much. There we go. And you can see how I'm playing with the Z intensity also, because as we get into some of these areas, I really need to crank it up in order to see the results. Oops. There you go. I accidentally hit V. Alright, so I can keep going through this, just kind of adding more detail in there. I don't want to go too high in any one area. So before I get any further, I want to make sure that this level is as detailed as I can get it all over the place. So as I start tweaking this, I don't want to like leave the head like that because I haven't pulled out any chin, eyes, nose, or anything like that. So I would go through this and I would pull out some of the features, like there's the nose, here's the eye, or the ears. Just some creature. Right. And now let's push the head in a bit. There we go. So let's say that that's good enough for now. So now I can add more divisions like this. I can go back to my brushes. Then I would add as much division as I need to on this area, or as much detail as I need to. So if I want to push in where the neck is at, I can push in where the neck is at. And just kind of soften that transition. And then usually the higher detailed I get, the smaller my brush is going to get because I'm adding in smaller amounts of detail. So there's the chin. We're pulling the nose out a little bit more. Push the eyes in.
So what was it to push the eyes in? Like push the
Alt.
reverse? Alt.
Yep. Alt is your reverse. So any brush you're on, you can just use Alt. Come back here. I have that clay buildup, so I'm going to go and add some stuff in the back. I'm going to push in there the center of the back is.
Pinching is one of the worst enemies, huh?
It is. It's not normally as bad as it's doing it during this lecture, but that's what happens when you show it in front of people. There we go. Let's smooth that out. Alright, so we just keep going over the entire character like that. I'm using inflate, I'm using move, I'm using the clay buildup. Keep going until you get to the level where you're like, okay, this is looking good. Don't detail anything right away. Like, your detail happens on those last couple levels. So even like this back being as like bumpy as it is right now, that's fine, because I can smooth it out. Your job is just to kind of get the gesture of it. If you kind of squint at your character and you can see the detail there, you can see where his shoulders are and his chest and all that, that's what you want. This mess right now is just, I don't know what happened to him. Whatever. So, yeah, those are typically the brushes I'm going to use. Now, let's say we wanted to add more detail to it, or we're just getting some weird stuff. So, like, some weird areas might be like in this hand here. If I go into this hand and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to pull out fingers here. Well, there's not enough divisions here to pull out because it's just so tiny, okay? So what I can do is I can always go to a new shape. So I can just go to my document and say new. And of course you save it just to be safe. Like that. He's still here, so if I were to just click and drag, I still get him back where he was. I hit T, spin him around, and then I can edit and do whatever else I was doing to him. Okay, so just make a new document again. No. So what we can do is I can just create a hand off of a Z-sphere. So I'm going to create a sphere like this. Make sure my symmetry is on. There we go. And I'm just going to pull out, like, this is where the knuckles are going to be. Nope. Just need to move it over a little bit. Alright, I'll turn symmetry off and just do that manually. X. Move. That goes there. Let me push these in a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is just make the hand separate and then just attach it right to the guy.
Can you get a grid in here?
A grid?
Yeah. Like in Maya and stuff?
No, there is somewhere. I typically don't use it. Oops. There's more tools down here. Come on. Well, there's more tools down there. And under Preferences, under Viewport, Interface, somewhere there was a grid. I forget where. Yeah. So I'm just going to move these fingers where they would go. I'm going to go to my cue, drag this over. Okay. Even like one finger, I can model one finger and then just have that duplicated to the other pieces. So there's my other knuckles. And while we're going to duplicate this, I'm just going to subtract these. There we go. All right. So there's the start of our hand. So let me just make that into a adaptive skin. Make, yes. Okay. So what I do now is I come into the shape, I add some divisions to it. Come on. And I just start shaping this. Oops, I went to the wrong one. Let me go back to that one. There we go. And I start shaping this into an actual hand. So I'm pulling this out to give it the hand shape. And I'm not concerned with the shape of, like, this is a sphere, like this is flowing this way. I'm not concerned with that because it's actually going to rebuild all those divisions on it before we take it in there and start moving stuff together. For some reason, my depth keeps getting, like, thrown off. Come on. Like that should be at 0. There we go. Good. I'll push this in. Pull that out. And this is how it should be working. The other guy seemed like there was something off, and I don't know, I clicked something out. I don't know what happened. Whoops. Alright. So now I'm going to go into the finger here, and I could add just a little bit of detail to him. Let me make sure that my brush, that's good. I'll pull it up above the surface and take this intensity down. And just tapering in the sides just to blend them in. I'll come underneath. There we go. That kind of looks like a finger. And again, I haven't added like any lines or anything because I'm just not at that level yet. I don't have that level of detail inside the character, inside the geometry. And if that's the index finger, then the thumb obviously would be over here. So we just have to keep that in mind too. I'm going to need to smooth it out. Like I can't go any further in what I had as far as detail, so I need to smooth it out so I can add more detail to this. So I soften that. That's good. Let's say I want to pull out right here where the wrist would be. I'm going to go to the control key and I'm just going to draw in like where I want to pull this out. And what this does is it creates a mask. And that way I can kind of tweak and say, oh, I don't want that. So I can just control Alt and deselect that, and just control click that. Control Alt to subtract that, Control add that, smooth it out, cool. Alright, so now I can just go to my move brush, and if I start to drag it, you'll see how it drags the stuff I didn't select. So I just hold Control and I click, and that will toggle your mask between the two. So now I could grab this and pull it out. Okay. Now this method is coming up really, really blocky looking, or really messy. If I switch to the regular move tool, I can do that. Now the move tool is a horrible move tool. I'm going to click and drag, and you get these 3 circles. You get these things here. You get all this mess. And just to show you, if I click and drag this, it scales. Like that doesn't make sense, but it does it. I'm just use the middle thing here, and I can pull it out. And that pulls the entire thing out. And I go back to Q. I control drag, and that clears my mask. Now here's where we're going to run into the issue though, is that now that I've scaled that out, I have no divisions or very few divisions in the center. So what happens is we don't have any geometry there to tweak. So if I wanted to shape that, I can't do it. Even if I add more geometry, all it does is add it to the areas where there already was stuff. So there's, if I change this to polyframe, you can see the wireframe and how dense it is here and how loose it is there. So you can see how we kind of like lost all that deformation there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under my geometry, and I'm going to turn this into a different kind of surface. So right now it's just kind of like a polygon that we keep smoothing out. There's another surface called the Dynamesh. And most of the stuff that you'll see modeled is done using Dynamesh, because what it does is it constantly rebuilds the wireframe every time you tell it to refresh. So the biggest thing we do is there's a resolution. So if I set this to a value too low, it's going to basically block it in too small. If I set it too high, then obviously we run the risk of having a lot of divisions on there. So like 256 may be good, we'll find out. I'm going to hit Dynamesh, and I'm going to say yes. And that's what we got. Okay. Now what happened was when I hit Dynamesh, it says, would you like to freeze subdivision levels before entering Dynamesh? And I hit yes. So what it does is it eliminates all my previous layers. Okay. So you know how I hit Control D and it smoothed it out, Control D, smoothed it out? Well, that just got rid of all those Control Ds. So I'm going to come up here and say delete everything lower than this level. Then go into Dynamesh. And now I have a Dynamesh mesh. Okay? Now what that means is that we have divisions all over the place. So over here, where I had no divisions or very few divisions, I actually have the same amount of divisions as I have here, because it spreads out all those divisions all over the entire thing. If I go to my poly mesh, you can see the divisions on here now. Okay. Here's where they were before. I'll turn this up to 256 just so we can see it even further. There it is now. So the higher that resolution, the more detail we're adding into that. So let me turn polyframe off. And now I can go into my move tool. Kind of push those in together. I can go ahead and kind of smooth out some of those areas. I probably really need to crank up that intensity on the smooth. There we go. And then Dynamesh does have this habit of kind of making everything kind of blocky. So you just have to go over and kind of smooth everything out. There we go. All right, now here's where the reason we changed this to Dynamesh, not just because of that, because Dynamesh is basically like exactly like clay, where I can take pieces off and I can apply them to other areas. I can cut off this finger and put it in another spot. Now when I went to this poly frame, you may have noticed that the finger here is actually like two different colors. Okay, so the hand is a color, this is a color, and this is a color on there. And I think if the tip is a color, it should be. So I'm going to turn the poly frame off. What that allows me to do is, remember, Control allows us to draw masks. Okay, Control Shift allows us to select those different colors. Okay, those are called polygroups. So if I Control Shift and I click on the hand here, oops, like that, you'll see how it hides the finger. But then I Control Shift click on it again, and it shows the finger, right? So now there's just the finger. So what I can do here is I can go to my Subtool, and I can say extract. My thickness will be 0, and I'm going to say extract. No smoothing on there too. There we go. So now what that does is it takes whatever I had before and it pulls it off as a separate shape. Okay. So now if I go into that one, it should be right here. It's probably right on top of it. All I need to do is it's right on top of it. I'm just going to go to split. There we go. And say split to parts. And say OK. Try that again, like that. Extract. Let's go to the move tool and just move it aside. Oh, you're right, sorry. Extract, accept, good. Okay, so now there it is. Now I have a separate subtool. So now I can go in here and just move this over. And then when I Control Shift click, come on. Shouldn't have gotten rid of the other one. Oh, that's why. I wasn't clicked on that subtool. There we go. So now I'm on this subtool. I can click on this. I'm going to move this over. And I'm just going to place this where I want this finger to be. Oops, I told you that move tool sucks. There. I'll go to the scale tool. The scale tool is no better. See, like the middle one you think you grab, but no, it's the tip one. And then rotate. Rotate, we grab the tip also. I can rotate it. And I think I twisted this a little bit, so I'm just going to jump back to that. There we go. Alright, so that's good enough. So we'll go to the move tool again, move this. Right about there. Okay, so it's intersecting it. It should be good. So what I'm going to do is then take these two and just merge them together. So I'm going to say merge, merge visible. Let me clear my mask. Merge visible. Or merge down, there we go. Okay, so now these are on the same shape. So I'm going to go to back to my Dynamesh. And I'm going to turn it off and then turn it back on. Now what this should do is then take these two shapes that are now touching each other and make them all one Dynamesh. Okay? So once they're all one Dynamesh, then all I have to do, so my draw size is like crazy now. Oh, because I'm in there. Let's go to my smooth tool and just smooth that out. So now instead of having to draw each finger manually, I can just draw one finger and then copy and paste it to the other one. Now if I go back to my poly mesh, you'll see we still have that shape right there. So I'm just going to undo that. Control Shift click it. Here's the fingers. Control Shift click again. There I get the fingers by themselves. I'm going to extract it again. Make sure I hit accept this time. Go back to Control Shift to bring that back. There we go. And then scoot the hand over or scoot the fingers over. Either one doesn't matter. Maybe I'll rotate this too. Oops. Go jump to the fingers, and then I can shrink these down. And rotate it a bit. Okay. Now if I need to edit just one of those fingers, they have their own polygroup still. So I can still Control Shift click. Come on. You should have your own polygroups. You do. Let me Control drag to deselect and then Control Shift click. No. Oh, because I'm not in draw. Never mind. There we go. Control Shift click. There we go. This. They're all part of the same one. I'm just going to remake the polygroups on that one, just so I can get them. Because if you look at them, they're the same color, so that's why they're doing what they're doing. So if I go down to my polygroups right here, and I say merge, or just say auto groups. There we go. So now I have two different groups. So it just separates those because it knows they're different pieces. Now I can Control Shift click this one, and then I can go to my scale tool, and I can shrink this one down. So now it's more pinky sized. Control Shift click, bring this one up. Come on, zoom out. There we go. Scale that one up a bit. Go to the move tool, move it up a bit. Alright, it's pretty close. Maybe a little bit of rotation in there. Alright, should be good enough. Now I have to make sure too that they're not colliding with the other ones, because if my fingers are like intersecting as it merges into that poly mesh, it'll actually merge the fingers together, and it's very difficult to separate it. So I think there's enough room between them right now. Alright, so I'm just going to Control drag to clear that mask. Go back to my subtools, go back to merge, say merge visible, or go here and just say merge down. Yes, there we go. Go back to my Dynamesh, under geometry, turn it off, turn it back on. Go back to my smooth, And I can just smooth out that transition between them. And if I see that I've tweaked something, like I accidentally moved this, I guess, I can just pull that back over. And all my poly groups are still here. So if I Control-Shift-click it, I can just isolate that one item and then tweak that one item. All right, that should be good. Okay. Control-Shift-click again. There we go. Now I would do the same thing for the thumb, just adding the thumb onto that side and then just tweaking how that's going to look. Now to get this wrist and hand, oops, just going to inflate this slightly. Come on, there you go. All right, it's good enough for whatever. All right, so to get this hand onto my body here, what I need to do is I go to this shape, and I need to come down to my subtool, and I need to append the subtool. So here is my last hand. There it is. And you'll see how now we get it in the same group. So now all we have to do is just go through and size it, just like we did for the fingers. So it's the same exact process, shrinking it down. There we go. And then rotating it. So if you get any part that you're like, ooh, I'm not really liking how the foot's turning out, the hand's turning out, whatever, and you think you better off just kind of modeling it separately and attaching it, you can do that because it's just that easy with that Dynamesh. Oops. I want to rotate. There we go. I don't know. I really don't know. I wish it was. I just want Maya's movements and ZBrush's ability to sculpt. That's what I want. I just wanted to snap that. Why can't you just snap right there? All right. So definitely like how it's intersecting the leg, that's a no-no because obviously it would intersect the leg. It would stick there. All right. So that should be good enough for now. Oops. So I can just jump back to this and maybe just inflate. There we go, just to kind of cover up that area, just to make sure that we're sealing the deal there. Then we come down to our merge. We merge this down, make it OK. We go back to our geometry, go back to Dynamesh, hit OK. Now you'll see here that it really degraded everything that we had. Because our hand resolution at 128, it was fine because we had this hand. But now we have the entire body getting 128, so it spreads the vertices over this entire thing. So I'm going to hit undo, and I'm going to take the resolution up to a crazy amount like 2048. And then I'll Dynamesh. We'll see if we're good. If we're not, we'll undo it and then pick a higher resolution. The more resolution we have, the longer it's going to take. We just have to be patient and let it do its thing.
Now, when you're putting the hand there, is there like a way where you can just kind of like, I guess, flip the hand, like kind of just like...
Right, yes.
Yeah.
We can mirror the hand. We can flip the geometry.
Okay.
Under that deformation, once this is done thinking, there's a whole bunch of other tools inside here for just like, if I know I just want to rotate it with a slider, there's sliders for all that. And there's even under the geometry, there's like mirroring. So once we have the hand on one side, we can mirror it to the other side too. So we don't have to worry about doing it all the entire time. On the top left, you'll see there's a projection in progress bar. So we're just going to let that go, and it's just going to continue working. Now I've also put the hand on backwards. That's like a weird, yeah, I put it on backwards.
That's why I was asking the question. I was like, oh, poor guy.
Yeah, whatever. That's how they are on his planet. With this one being at 4 million, there we go. I can smooth out this transition here. I can go in with my clay buildup and just kind of smooth it out. Now, one thing we don't get with Dynamesh is we don't get the ability to go back levels, right? So I can't go back to like where I had lower resolution stuff. The only thing I can do is lower this resolution and then turn off Dynamesh and turn it back on. Now, instead of going here, you can control drag. And control dragging, it releases masks, but it also redoes your Dynamesh. So instead of having to turn it off, turn it back on, you can just do that. So you can't go back down to different levels. You can't go up different levels. But it does allow you to nicely divide all your stuff. If you had a cylinder, typically the cylinder's divisions go vertically, and on the cap there's nothing. So Dynamesh evens all that stuff out. So you can create some really neat stuff with it. While this is thinking still, where's this? All right, it's thinking. There we go. All right, so now we're down to 2.23 million divisions. So obviously a lot less divisions. Now, just like I said before, we can cut stuff off of here. So these things on the bottom, they have these slices and they have trims. So if I go to my trim curve, there we go. Yes. It's one of those fancy ones. So I hit Control Shift, and that gets me into the trim curve here. And so now all I do is I just draw. Oops. There we go. Control Shift. There we go. And then I just draw this shape. On. All right, let me switch to the other one. Trim circle, yes. There we go. So what that's going to do is it's going to slice that piece of mesh off. It just literally just shoots straight through that circle and deletes anything that's inside the circle. So it could be a little bit tricky to get this. I was trying to use the line one, but if I would have done it, it would have deleted basically everything in that line. So it would have deleted like the leg and stuff. There it goes. So it's gone now. Just Control Shift this. I can hold the space bar down to kind of move it. I'll have to delete that little chunk too. So taking stuff off is obviously, or is, you can see it's not as difficult as putting it on. Nope. And then this is also the same way you can create pieces of hard geometry, because you can start off with a basic shape, and you could do one of these, and it'll delete the stuff and give you a pretty nice edge. If you look at that edge there, that looks like a pretty nice edge you could use for something like a piece of metal or something that would be on top of the character. It's still floating. Go away. Okay, so you're not going to learn everything in one lecture. You're not going to learn everything in just one assignment. The idea is that you learn enough that you understand the basic concept, that you understand the basic workflow inside of ZBrush. And then as you're playing with things, someone may show you a new brush, and you're like, oh, that's cool. This was one of my other students' projects. They built a torso, and they had it 3D printed. And so part of the thing with this is that we have to know how to take the geometry and then make it ready for 3D printing. So like the eyes, it's hard to see, but there's actual spheres there for the eyes, so that they're there. Also, this flat bottom has to work out too, because if you don't have a flat bottom, then it's going to rock. So they use the trim to cut the bottom off to make it nice and flat so it could sit on the desk. So there's lots of different little tricks. I don't know why that little piece isn't deleting, but there's other ways to get it to delete. Oh, now his arm's broken. Poor guy. All right. All right, so like I said, you're not going to learn everything inside of these just doing a couple things, but you'll learn enough to kind of become a little bit dangerous with that. And some of these brushes, you just kind of, whoa, that's too much. You just kind of have to play with them to see. And that's supposed to be like a fold brush. Looks like a stitch brush or something. Yeah. That might be kind of neat. You can put something inside there. You guys watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Like the bad guy? He had that baby or something inside his stomach? Yeah. You can do something like that too. Alright. So save iterations definitely. Let me just show you that light box thing because it's pretty cool. Shadow box, thank you. There is a... It's supposed to be a startup file in here. Demo projects. Oops. No. Or maybe not, it's going to crash. No, I don't want him. Document, new, no.